Welcome back to No Better Argument. So today we're doing a team breakdown. I'm looking specifically at the OKC Thunder. Now they were at home today to the San Antonio Spurs. So I'll be going over some specific plays from that game before looking at the offense and defensive system the Thunder run. And then I'll finish off with a summary of the team. So kicking things off with the matchup against the Spurs, I want to look at the first quarter. So Al Horford here just showed some real bounce and athleticism that he definitely did not display in Philly. Like, he looked like he was on his last legs with us. SGA is the team's most important player. I think we can all agree. And today he had a real mindset of getting to the rim. I can't remember a time where he settled for a jumper. So it was really interesting and quite fascinating to watch. Every time he caught the ball, he was just had one goal in mind, and that was just to get to the rim every time. And he's really elite at finishing around the rim. I think it was 4 of 4 to start the game. Had 8 points in the first quarter, and they all just came through drives to the rim. So you can see all these clips here of just basically him working his way close to the basket and just using his length, using his strength to play through contact. But all of these finishes are really quality, and it's something to note going forward because I think it can really open up his outside game. Then another young guy they have on the team, Darius Baisley, and this was also a bit of a prelude to what I'll speak about with the Thunder offense. But as soon as the team gets a stop on this possession in particular, Baisley just bolts all the way to the rim. The pass is a bit long. He could have regathered it and basically gone straight up, but instead he dishes it off to Horford for the lay-in. But it just goes back to the team trying to get out and run at every opportunity they get because they do struggle in the half court. To note, Muscala and Hamidou Diallo are the first two guys off the bench. And you can see here right away that Muscala's kind of put in a position to be a distributor and play make. So he's throwing the ball here at the wing, and he makes a nice read of Maledon basically cutting to the rim. Bit of a miscommunication on the Spurs side of things with their defense, but a really great pass by Muscala to find Maledon for that lay-in. So now in the second quarter, we get to see the OKC bench, and they are really young. So they have Isaiah Roby, Pokusevski, Hamidou Diallo, Maledon, like I've just mentioned, and then they have Mike Muscala as well, and they even played a little bit of Justin Jackson. But in that group of names that I just mentioned, Mike Muscala is probably the most experienced, so it just goes to show that that bench is super young and inexperienced in the league. With that, obviously, comes the good and the bad. So here's some clips it's one clip, but basically it's back-to-back possessions for the team. You can see the bad first off with Maledon just basically not being able to create out of a simple pick and roll. He throws a pretty poor pass. It's deflected by Keldon Johnson, and then Keldon Johnson receives the ball back in the end to make a layup. So they immediately get punished for a pretty poor turnover. Then the good. Ball gets swung to Muscala. Muscala keeps the ball moving to Pokusevski in the corner. Muscala then screens for Poku, and Poku drives in, let's say, semi-aggressively because he kind of then stops or gets stopped in his track. But then Justin Jackson makes a great backdoor cut, and Poku finds it. So as we enter the second half, for the first possession of the third quarter for OKC, a guy who I haven't mentioned, but he features heavily in this clip, Luguentz Dort. So here he makes a pass to Al Horford, and then he sort of slightly enters into the paint, but then repositions himself about the elbow spot on the three-point line, and is able to receive a nice pass and raise up for the shot pretty confidently, no hesitation, knocks it down. And so Dort is known as pretty much a defensive guy that's working on, getting a more consistent jumper. We saw his impact defensively on Harden in the bubble in the playoffs, but that shot was for the most part something that's very streaky and inconsistent. But this year, I know it's only a 10-game sample size. It does include today's game against the Spurs. Dort is shooting 43% from 3. So look, it's obviously not sustainable, but if he can get somewhere in the mid-30s for percent-wise, I think if he ended up 34 or 35% for the season from three-point range, that's pretty good, and it's something to build off of for next year, that's for sure. Now, a second clip of Darius Baisley. So again, it's really showing his flashes similar to, his athleticism, how he can basically get up the floor in the previous clip. This one's in the half court, and he basically just with a few jabs puts a real shimmy on Trey Lyles. Trey Lyles is all over the place for the most part, and he's able to just blow by him then and throw down a pretty nice dunk. OKC, like most teams, they're looking to capitalize on mismatches whenever they get the opportunity. So you can see here in particular that Lonnie Walker switched on to Al Horford, and the team's smart enough to recognize that and make the most of it. Ball's thrown down to Al. Pretty hard for Walker to be able to stop that one-on-one without fouling. Basically, Al Horford does a nice duck through and finishes with a reverse layup. Issue with OKC defensively, and it goes for any young team. They foul way too much. So just this third quarter in particular, with 5 minutes to go in the third quarter, the Spurs were in the bonus, so they were shooting free throws every single time. There were 4 possessions in a row in the fourth quarter, in the final 2 minutes, that were just absolutely brutal for OKC, and it really was a key reason as to why the Spurs were able to come away with the win. So we start with an Al Horford 3 here on the wing or extended elbow. Pretty disappointing. You always hate to see one go in and out, so that started things off in a pretty poor way because it followed up with a possession defensively where George Hill played a little bit too high up on Patty Mills. Yes, Patty Mills, elite three-point shooter, but he's also got elite quickness, blows past George Hill easily for the layup. And that's followed up with ball was swung pretty nicely, came to Baisley in the corner. And yes, he's left-handed dominant, but as he was able to get to the rim, he tries to finish with the right. It's pretty much a gimme, so I think left or right-handed, you should probably get close to finishing that. Baisley doesn't. Then that leads to a follow-up where they really need a stop, and the shot gets put up, it's missed, so there's an opportunity to get the rebound, and Keldon Johnson outworks Baisley down under the basket with boxing out to get the offensive rebound. OKC's obviously over the limit, so Spurs are in free throw bonus territory, so they have to revert to a foul game, and that's where the Spurs, solidify the victory and take home the chocolates. The Thunder offensive system, their first option is to get out and run. I showed the clip of Darius Baisley, how they got the stop and he immediately sprinted down the other end and they outlet the ball to him. That's their first option. They have a lot of athletes on this team, a lot of young guys. They want to use that, quickness, speed to their advantage. They do have a pretty strong backcourt. They have the young budding superstar in SGA. They have the veteran presence in George Hill. So they're comfortable with their ball handling situation in the half court because both those guys can operate in pick and rolls, operate in isolation situations, knock down shots themselves. On top of it, they've got Al Horford. He's a great center big man to have because he can operate in the post. You can have him in the pick and roll. He can pop. He can roll off the pick. And then on top of that, you can put the ball in his hands at the top of the key and use him as a distributor. So he can do dribble handoffs with him. He can use screens effectively to be able to find open guys because he is a good passer. When the game gets tight, like most teams, the ball is obviously in the best player's hands. So in this case, it's SGA. He's a real threat based off his length and size at the guard position. So he can obviously create easily in isolation or work off screens as well. Defensively, their stopper is obviously Luguentz Dort. He was on Lonnie Walker today. No DeRozan, so Walker was the main perimeter threat. He had a really good game against the Timberwolves, which DeRozan missed as well. So OKC clearly wanted to stop Lonnie from going off again. Then, like most teams, they switch a lot, but the issue with OKC is they can't stop fouling, like I mentioned earlier. It's their Achilles heel, and it's just due to youth and inexperience. They're not good at playing defense without fouling yet. So it's something they need to correct going forward, otherwise teams will definitely make the most of that. So the summary for OKC is they currently sit 5-5. So for the most part, they've had an impressive start. They actually haven't won a game at home yet, which is very interesting. All their victories have come on the road. I do expect them to play spoiler in a lot of these upcoming matches, at least up until the trade deadline, because I believe and I'm confident in the fact that they'll have raised guys like Al Horford's value, they'll have increased George Hill's value to the position where they'll be able to get some sort of asset back from, be it a young player that's underappreciated or just a draft pick. So I think we'll be here at the trade deadline after it's all sort of gone down being like, man, Sam Presti's done it again, because I think he'll be able to get some decent return for those two players in particular. And then post the trade deadline, I do expect to see OKC really start to tank. There's obviously a lot at stake with the draft this year, the 2021 class being absolutely stacked. So OKC knows what's at stake. They won't be stupid and potentially get a few meaningless wins at risk of having a worse draft position. So I do expect them to be a bottom 5 team in terms of record, and that'll put them in a pretty strong spot to be able to end up with a top 3 pick and secure one of these young studs. So that wraps things up for this team breakdown of OKC. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know if you disagree or agree with anything I've said. I always love to hear a different perspective and engage in some b-ball chat. But in the meantime, enjoy this NBA ball, and I'll speak to you guys very soon.